Oscar back to my studio in Uptown, and I drove with my hand on it in the car. I even put the seatbelt across the Oscar. It's hilarious. So this is an interesting story because it goes back 28 years, and it's not a story that I really told the whole thing about. 28 years ago, I was a model maker working with R.S. Owens in Chicago. R.S. Owens is a trophy manufacturer who manufactures all the prestigious awards for all the events in the United States, sports, film, and the Oscar, the Academy Awards. That's where this story is about. I helped remake the new Academy Award. 28 years ago, I was working in a loft in uptown Chicago in a building called the Lorelei. I had the second floor of 1922 hotel, but I was excited. I was an entrepreneur tearing it up after art school. It didn't happen that fast. And I had gotten a few jobs off the school job board for model making for R.S. Owens, and we were making little stars and things like this, me and my buddy Peter. One opportunity led to the next, and they eventually had some trust in me. Scott Siegel was the president of R.S. Owens at the time, and he said, "Mike, I have a special project for you. Why don't you come down to the office? I'll show it to you and explain it to you." So I get to the office. What happened was, he said, "We need a mold of this. We need a mold of the original Oscar that they had, the oldest version that they had in their vaults." And so I went down and I got that, and my job was to make a silicone mold and a plaster casting, and then they were going to take the bronze tooling off of that. When I went down to see Scott, he was a little nervous. I remember being in his office, and he had the Oscar in a Courvoisier velvet bag, and I was like, "Wow, look at that." And he's like, "Now you can make a mold of this and it won't be damaged, right?" And I reached for it, and I'm like, "Right." And he goes, "Now how can we be sure that it won't be damaged?" And I reached toward it and I said, "Because I do this all the time, it'll be fine." And he takes it back, "Will any of the surface be hard?" So we're doing this back and forth, me so nervous, him so nervous. I'm like, what do I do here? I was so excited to do this job. It was the most prestigious thing. And he just said, "We don't want there to be any talk about this." He was a very wise man, because I later understood that he thought that if the press talked about it, it would dilute the people that were winning, and then it would become about the trophy rather than the award. And he knew his place that he wanted his company to have is always back up the award. And I thought, this is a wise man. I liked Scott. We had a great relationship. So I took that Oscar back to my studio in Uptown, and I drove with my hand on it in the car. I even put the seatbelt across the Oscar. It's hilarious. So I make the mold, I make the plaster, they send a courier to come pick up both. About a week later, I get a call, and they said, "Mike, can we send this back to you, have this made in a softer plaster?" And I'm like, "Sure, no problem," because I cast it in a really hard, did the best I could, hard 4-ton MG model. And when the model came back, I looked at it, and it had been all sanded and scratched up, and I was like, "Oh, looky here, there's more to the story than they're telling me." So basically, that's at the point where I learned that they were retooling and that they were sharpening all the lines. Perfectly legit things to do. But now it got to the point where I sent it back one more time, and then they broke it. And then Scott's like, "Can you do this work?" He said, "We're shipping this thing around. You've done everything right. We're messing it up. Let's just keep under your roof and get this done." I said, "Sure, what do you want?" He's like, "Sharpen this detail, make the short cider." He says, "The base needs to be changed. Let's put a new base on it. And then we have to adjust the height to calculate for the shrinkage of the bronze mold. When they make the bronze mold, that metal shrinks, and then when they pour the nickel into that mold, that metal shrinks." So there's a calculation that the end result has to compensate. I had to make the Oscar bigger to compensate for the shrinkage of the metal. And I said, "Why all the fuss?" And he said, "Because what if somebody last year that won an Oscar wins another Oscar this year, and it's sitting on their shelf next to it, and we see a 1/4-inch size difference?" He said, "They'll know something's up." I haven't won 2 Oscars back to back, so I didn't know this could be an issue. And I said, "No problem." I said, "Just give me the measurements of what you need made." They'd give me the measurements, I'd cut it at the ankle, I would add pins, I would raise it up, and then I would send it back, and they'd say, "We gave you the wrong measurements." 6 or 7 times we did this. And I was really frustrated because I had bid a flat rate on this, of course. I was just at my wit's end. The excitement had worn off, and I was ready to just put clown shoes on this thing and use it as a doorstop, because it had lost the Oscar appeal to me. It was now a pain in my ass. I did it one last time, and I took it down down to Scott, and I was just like, you're killing me on this, man. I said, you got to come my way. He said, Mike, he said, we just can't get this math right. He said, you've hit it every time, but it's from our side. He was a great CEO. He didn't like push his dirty laundry on me. He just straight up said, this is the problem we're having trouble solving. I know we're asking you to solve it. He said, but now I'm asking you. He goes, what do I do? And I said, Scott, what are we talking about the difference here? And he goes, I think it's between the 16th and the 1/8 of an inch. And I took the Oscar off of his desk, the original, and I said, you see that piece of felt on the bottom? I said, put a bigger piece of felt on the bottom of your pedestal. I said, we're done here, please. And he's like, I like this idea. So then our worlds parted. I have no idea what happened since. I know 0 famous people with Oscars. My guess is after 28 years, they've repeated that process again, because every time they pour, basically they have a bronze mold that has a negative impression of the Oscar in it. And they pour the metal in there, they open it, and they take the statue out. And then they clean up the bronze mold, and they'll buff it to get the shine, to get good surface. Well, if you buff something enough times, you're actually taking away the surface of it, so the Oscar becomes fatter and fatter. So the one that we remade is thinner. And the trick is, and this is the part I don't think even famous people have looked at, is I can tell the difference between the old Oscar and the new Oscar. And I pointed this out to Scott, and he was like, everybody looks at the Oscar from the front. It looks the same. When you look at it from the side, the old Oscar is fat, the new Oscar is thin. And that's how you tell that somebody won that after 1996, 95. So all you Oscar winners out there, call me for verification. That story, I was so happy to do that. What kind of guy lets a 26-year-old have this kind of thing? He trusted me not to talk to the press. He trusted me not to F up his prize. I mean, I did my part too, to stand up to his beliefs in me. But to his testament even later, he knew I took it on the chin doing that job. And he called me back a couple weeks later and he said, Mike, I know the Oscar thing didn't go too well for you financially. He said, but I have another job for you that I think you'll enjoy. And he said, you can bid much more liberally on it. Here's what it is. He said, we're launching an MTV sculpture to the space shuttle, via the space shuttle, to have an award presentation from space. I would like you to take that trophy, which weighs 11 pounds, and make it weigh less than 1 pound. Can you do that? And I said, yes, I can.